Morning. All right. We'll just move this over here. It is such a blessing to be with you here this morning. I can't tell you how excited I am for today, how much I've looked forward to today for a long time. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. And in case you're confused as to what I'm talking about, you never get to get rid of me after this, okay? So I'm here. Today marks the official beginning of our full-time relationship together, if you will. And I'm so excited. I can't tell you how much I've looked forward to this day for the past 18 months or so. I've had the privilege and opportunity to work with you, to grow in our relationship together, to get to know each other, and now we get to continue that in kind of a full-time manner. And I'm so blessed and so thankful for each and every one of you in the way that you have welcomed me and Maya into your family here, and you've really just made us feel welcome. And we're so excited to be here for the long term. We're so grateful for that opportunity. Yesterday was a big day for me. I officially finished my time at Freed-Hardeman University. I got to walk across stage, and perhaps against the better judgment of the faculty and staff, they gave me 2 diplomas, so I got those and did the work to get them. So thankful for that time that I got to spend there in that place. What a wonderful, wonderful place, wonderful people. But that marks the end of my college experience. And it's always a talking point. When you're in this stage of life, people, want to ask you, what are you going to do with your life? You're in college, all right, what's your major? And it's always a talking point when you say you're a Bible major, because, most people have no concept or relation of what that is. What do you even do as a Bible major? Even in the circle of Freed-Hardeman, one of my first roommates, he asked me one day, he was like, what do you guys even study? What do you study? I messed with him. I told him, I was like, well, we study how to speak with ancient spirits. Of course, that's a joke. We don't really study that, but he believed it, believe it or not. So I messed with him a little bit with that. But maybe you've wondered the same. What does a Bible major actually learn? Well, we learn a lot of things. We study the ancient text of Hebrew and Greek, learning to read those, translate them. We study homiletical structures of speaking so that we can properly construct lessons and sermons. We study the scriptures themselves in an in-depth way, and we study biblical models for ministry. We study a lot of things. And this was the first year that Freed-Hardeman has done any kind of honoring ceremony, so to speak, for graduating Bible majors. Nursing majors get their white coat, and other different majors may get a pin of some kind or some kind of token or keepsake to take with them, symbolizing the completion of their study. Well, this was the first year, and I was blessed to be a part of it, that Freed-Hardeman has done something like that for the graduating class of Bible majors. And while other disciplines receive a pin or a cord or some other token of honor, we received something very different. We all received one of these. Now you recognize this. This is the Amazon Basics hand towel from the bath collection. It's in maroon because it's Freed-Hardeman. And you may be thinking, as I was when I walked into that ceremony, what in the world is happening right now? Why am I being handed a towel? But it's to symbolize something very important. Dr. Justin Roger, Dean of the Bible Department, told us when we received these that if there was one thing that they as a staff wanted us to leave with, it was a heart and a mission of service. And that seems appropriate for today, because just as they wanted me to leave that place with that in mind, I want to begin this ministry with you, hoping that we can also operate with and love each other with a heart and a mission of service. The towel is a reference to John chapter 13, which will be our text for today. It was already read so well for us, verses 1 through 6. We'll read down a little bit further later on in the lesson. But service is an integral part of the Christian life, not just for preachers and ministers, but for every Christian. We must all be servants. This morning, I want to look at the 3 C's of service. Now, that's not the letter C. It's a little bit of a play on words I'm doing here. This is the 3 C's, S-E-E, of service. When we think about service, it's very important how we view it and how we view those who we are serving. And while perhaps it's difficult for us to see the things that we are supposed to see, fortunately, Jesus points the way. And He points the way especially here in John chapter 13. So this morning, let's look with me at the 3 C's of service. And number 1 is to see people. See people. John chapter 13 and verse 1, the text reads, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that His hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end." Jesus here is sharing His final meal, His final time with His closest friends. These 12 apostles who now for 3 years or so had walked with Him, had studied under Him, had seen the miracles that He'd done. They had heard all of His teaching. They had really given up everything to follow Jesus. And while often we think about them as these fellow laborers with Him, and so they were, these were also Christ's friends. The people that He spent more time with on this earth than perhaps any other. And it's very interesting that here in this passage, we see what Jesus knows. Jesus knows the situation that He's in. He knows this is His final few hours with these men. And it's important to think about how He chooses to see them in that moment. When we enter a room, what do we see? When we enter a room full of people and we see all that they have to offer, what do we choose to focus on and notice? Well, there's many things we could. Do you see problems? That's easy to do. When we look at people and we say, ooh, that person, they're pretty selfish. This lady over here, well, she's a busybody. You don't want to be around her. That guy over there, man, he's just rude all the time. You can't even have a conversation with him. Do we see problems when we walk into a room? Maybe perhaps that's not an issue for you, but maybe you see pawns. You look at people and you think, well, man, if I'm friends with him, he can get me in this group or that circle, and I can have that in. I can be in the cool crowd, or I can have this opportunity at work that I wouldn't have otherwise if I was friends with that guy. Well, if she notices me, well, I could get a leg up on this person or that person. I could be the front runner for this position. If that person puts in a good word for me, I might be able to fill in the blank. Do you see pawns when you walk into a room? Jesus made a habit of seeing people and seeing them for what they were, not just a problem to be ignored or a pawn to be used in His own agenda. No, when Jesus saw people, He saw them for what they were, and that is souls. Jesus saw souls. He didn't just do that here with His best friends, though He certainly does. He does it with everyone. When we think about the famous account of the feeding of 5,000, Jesus has just been on the Sea of Galilee, and He gets off the boat, and a crowd of sick and diseased and poor and demon-possessed people come to Him. 5,000 men plus women and children, so it's an overwhelming crowd. Jesus is dealing with the loss that He's had just in John the Baptist being executed. That's Jesus' cousin, so he's mourning, he's tired, he's just gotten off the sea. And what does He do when this crowd of people, these undesirable people, comes to Him? Well, we see in Matthew chapter 14 and verse 14 that He had compassion on them and He healed their sick. Mark chapter 6 and verse 34 adds that they were like sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus knew that these people needed what he had to offer. Instead of seeing them as this crowd of diseased and sick people who were untouchable and undesirable, he gathered them to himself. He wanted to lead them. He wanted to be their shepherd. He saw people. In John 13, Jesus knows that the cross is just hours away. Don't you think in that moment that it would have been really easy for him to have a little bit more of a selfish attitude? To say, well, the cross is hours away. I need to take time for myself. I need to focus on me right now. But that's not what he does. Even in that moment, Jesus chooses to turn his attention outward. And it says there in verse 1 that he loved them to the end. Jesus loved these men to the end. Christ chooses to focus on the apostles instead of himself in this moment. If we are to serve like Christ, we must not be caught up in our own judgments, our own agendas, our own focuses. Rather, we must choose to see people and to offer them the loving service that Jesus did. Number one, we must see people. Number two, we need to see their needs. Continue reading with me in verse 2. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garment, and taking a towel, he tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Jesus, in this moment, not only sees the apostles and chooses to love them, he sees their need and chooses to take care of it. Jesus sees these nasty, unwashed feet and notices the need. Now, customarily, most all of us are probably familiar with this. Customarily, in the Jewish world at the time, when you entered somebody's house, your feet would be washed by a servant, most likely the lowliest of all the servants in the house. And that was because there was no cars at the time. There was no modern footwear. Nobody was walking around in Jordans back in the day. They had sandals at best and bare feet perhaps in most cases. So their feet, as they walked along the gravelly, dusty roads, would be dirty, filthy. Perhaps there might even be, damage from walking on the rocks and such things. They would be calloused feet, not well kept, if you will. And so customarily, when you entered a house, your feet would be washed as a way of welcoming you in, as a way of taking care of that simple but necessary need. It was done by the lowliest of servants. The apostles' feet are unwashed at this time. Now, perhaps it's because of this upper room situation. We get some indication from the text that perhaps, this upper room had some kind of exterior access, and maybe they weren't really being hosted per se by the master of the house, but rather they were kind of just staying there for that time of Passover. And so maybe there's no servant present to take care of the need, but for whatever reason, their feet remain unwashed. And their feet are nasty. They're dirty, stinky, calloused. They've walked miles, not only making the journey down from Galilee the week previous, but walking back and forth from the temple to the upper room, trips to Bethany and the Mount of Olives. Their feet were disgusting. But Jesus sees the need. A lot of times, we don't really have a problem with seeing the need. When we truly take the time to see people, we are really quick a lot of times to notice what they need. We can tell when people are hurting and they need comfort. We can tell when people are lonely and they need some company. We can tell when people are hungry and we know that their need is food. When they're neglected, we know that they need to feel wanted. We can tell many times when people are hopeless and they need hope. We often see these needs, but do we act? What do we do about it when we see these needs? Well, what did Jesus do? Jesus sees the need and takes immediate action to care for it. Now, Jesus had every excuse not to. It's easy for us to make excuses as to why it's not our job or it's not the time or we just don't want to take care of that. Jesus had every single excuse that we could think of to not wash the apostles' feet. Do you think he felt like touching those nasty feet? Well, absolutely not. Who would want to touch something so disgusting? Jesus had the excuse that the job was meant for someone else. It was meant for the lowliest servant, and he was the King of Kings. The job was meant for someone else, but Jesus didn't use that as an excuse. Did he want to wash the feet of the men that were about to leave him in his darkest moment? The men who just hours later, when the crowd comes to the garden, the mob comes to arrest Jesus, what do these men do? These men who are supposed to be his friends, they run away in fear. They abandon him. Do you think he wanted to wash the feet of those who were soon going to leave him high and dry? Do you think that he wanted to wash the feet of Judas, who it says is already in the process of betraying Jesus, and Jesus knows that he is? Do you think he wanted to wash those feet? Well, he did. He washed them too. Jesus has had a long day. He's had a long week, had a long year. He's had a long 3 years of ministry, and he knows he's going to have a long day tomorrow. But he still sees the need, and he takes care of what needs to be done. When we see the needs of others, we need to take action. Service is not just a concept exercise to be done in the mind and ignored in reality. Service is a way of living, a way of life. If we are servants who see, we are servants who must serve. We must see people's needs. And number 3, we must see people. We must see their needs, and we must see opportunity. We must see opportunity. If you would, skip down with me to verse 12. After Jesus has had a little bit of an interlude conversation with Peter, he kind of begins to address the entire group again after washing their feet. In verse 12 beginning, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garment, resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." Jesus does this great act of service for a purpose. He is taking advantage of this teaching opportunity. Jesus teaches them, and by extension us, the importance of service, of following his example of service, of not thinking too highly of ourselves, but humbling ourselves and being willing to take on whatever task needs to be done. But by his example, he also teaches us that service is a powerful opportunity to teach. Service is a powerful opportunity to teach. and we must see it as such. We can evangelize through service. I fear that a lot of times, perhaps in our time and place in history, evangelism can come off as this cold marketing to people. That people can feel like they're just treated as a number to be added to the statistics, and like we don't really care about them, but we just care about filling the pews. Sometimes we treat it that way, and that ought not be so. Service is the difference maker for people. If we really want to show people that we care, to show them that we love them, and that we want them to actually be part of our family here, if we make a habit of serving them, we can connect with them. They'll know that we care. They'll see it in their own lives, the evidence of it. And we can use that relationship as an opportunity to give them the greatest act of service that we can offer, telling them about Christ, telling them about the home in heaven that's prepared for His people, and inviting them, as Jesus does, to become a part of that family. That's the greatest act of service that we can give people, but we have to show them that we care before they will listen. So we can use service to evangelize, but we can also use it to edify. The edification of the saints is something that the New Testament makes a lot of comments on. It's very important to the first century Christians, and sometimes we tend to neglect it. We call ourselves a church family, and so we should act like one. In a family, you serve each other. Now, sometimes, if you have siblings, especially brothers as I do, you may serve each other with, a little bit of sarcasm, a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, mess with each other a little bit. But service is part of love. Service is part of love. The best way for us to cheer each other's spirits, to take care of each other when someone is down or hurting or just needs encouragement, is to show them that we care, to serve them, to be there for them. Jesus saw opportunity to serve, opportunity that service gave Him to teach, and He used it to uplift the disciples, to admonish them to serve like He had, to encourage them in that way. We must see the opportunities that service gives us and try to maximize them for Christ, not only as we evangelize, but also as we encourage and edify one another. If we are to be servants, if we are to be seeing servants, we have to see people, we have to see their needs, and we have to see the opportunities that service gives us. But as we begin to draw the lesson to a conclusion, you may have the question, how do I serve? What do I do to serve? Well, that's going to be a different answer for each and every one of us. Each one of us in this room has been given a talent by God that we can use to serve. Paul says that the church, though one body, is many members. We all serve a different purpose within the congregation, and we are to use our talents for God's glory. I can't really bake. That's not a talent that I hold. If you ever see me hand you a cake and I say I made this from scratch, just smile, take it, and throw it in the trash on your way out, all right? Just don't waste your time. That's not a talent I have, but some of you excel in that skill. Some of you have the talent of cooking. Some of you have the talent of just being able to sit with people and listen. You have that way with people that they just know you care by your listening. Some of you have an amazing talent when it comes to talking to people, to offering advice and wisdom. Some people's talent is visiting, making people feel loved and special in that way. Maybe your talent is writing cards or even making them, thinking of thoughtful gifts, cheering people on, being an encourager. There are innumerable ways that we can serve each other. And so I encourage you, find that talent you have for service and then use it. Today is a new beginning of sorts. We're beginning a new work in this place together, and no matter what you've done in the past, as far as service is concerned, why not commit today to greater service? Why not look inward and say, maybe I've done this, that, or the other in the past, but how can I do more? How can I serve more, make people feel more special? What can I give to Christ in my service that I've not previously given? We're a family here at Grundy Street, a family in Christ, in the Lord. But we can still make it a greater family if we will all fully lean into the service that Christ models for us. This morning, if you're not a Christian, the best way, the only way that you can begin your service to Christ is by becoming a part of His family, by becoming a child of God, putting off the old man of sin and becoming a new creation in Christ. But for those of us who are God's children already, Christians and servants are not an interchangeable role. If we are to be Christ's, we must be servants. To be a Christian is to be a servant. And so the question I leave with this morning is, how are you serving? And what changes need to be made for that service to even further be increased? Perhaps this morning you have no need of any kind of repentance nature, but maybe you're struggling. You need encouragement. You need prayers. Why not let us serve you in that way by wrapping our arms around you as a church family, praying for you? That's just one of the ways that we can serve each other. This morning, as we think about service, as we think about being Christ's people, His emissaries to the world, if you will, I leave you with the simple question, what do you need to do this morning to be more of a servant? Do you have a need? If you do, please make it known. Come forward as we stand and sing together.